Hello, my name's Angela Rossum. I'm an artist. I work with schools and community groups throughout Western Australia to discover and document the living things in the natural world. In this studio cast, made especially for Plastic Free July, we'll be meeting with a range of specialists who are interested in critters that live in the soil, in the science of soil and the things that live in it, in what we can do about pollution in the soil, but most especially plastic pollution. I'm fascinated by the communities of animals that live in the soil right under our feet.
Hi you guys, thanks for coming. And look, you've got a beautiful sample of compost. Let's just have a quick look at that. Yes, look, it's full of things. I can see it's full of little creatures rushing around. That's fantastic. Well, come on in. Elizabeth and Will have come along today and brought a sample from their own compost, and we're going to have a look in my compost, and we're going to see if I've got more creatures in my compost than you've got in your compost. Look at that, that's absolutely leaping with springtails. So springtails are tiny little detritivores, which means they eat the little leftover bits of green and stuff, and what they poo out the other end makes the sand full of goodness for plants to grow from. Okay, let's have a look at it under magnification. So this is from your compost sample. Let's put it under here. Oh my goodness, look, there's a springtail straight away. And they're the ones that are called Collembola, and they're a whole family. Oh my goodness, there is a pseudoscorpion.
Whoa,
Look at the tiny hairs on its little claspers.
that's so wicked.
So the three little round things there are soil mites.
Whoa.
That's one of those soil beetles. So when they snuffle under the soil, they're actually aerating the soil. So that's a really important thing that all of these little detritivores do.
You see all the stuff stuck to them.
Mm.
It's amazing how they would probably step on this every single day.
Yeah, exactly. It takes all of these little animals to help break down all of the fallen and leftover bits of green matter. So leaves, apple cores, trees that fall down, they all get munched up by these tiny creatures and pooed out, or they get broken down by fungi or bacteria. And that's happening under the soil the whole time, and that's why it's really important to have clean, healthy soil. Can you see that this one's different to that one? That has got a spring on its tail so it can flick and jump, but that one hasn't. Well, I haven't got any pseudoscorpions, so I think your compost wins. We're in the Hilton Harvest Community Garden today with Amy Warren, who's a committee member and one of the fantastic gardeners here, and helped to set up this amazing place. Amy has a long experience in waste education, and it's really interesting to talk with Amy a bit about contamination of soil with plastics. Amy, I think you brought along some stuff to show us today.
I have. So I've got a little tray of interesting things that have come out of my compost bin. So these used to be, work trousers, and
this is what's left after they've broken down. So if you put this in the compost thinking that it was going to break down, it doesn't. Unless you've selected something with all natural fibres, you're going to wind up with an amazing residue of things.
That's right, and it is actually really hard to find stuff that is all organic. So this is if you compost what you think is a full cotton shirt, that's a great idea because, if that's the end of the life of the shirt, it's nice to compost it, but you will be pulling pieces of cotton out of your
veggie. This must be nylon. Pieces of thread.
Yeah, nylon thread out of your veggie patch or garden for years to come. So it's something to be aware of for the keen composter. Birds would like to take this kind of material because it looks like something that's organic and build their little nest out of it. But what can happen is when they do build their nest out of some inorganic fibre like this, that it can tangle around the baby bird's wings and beak and so on, and really cause entanglement and suffering for the little baby chicks. But these are things that accidentally went in, which I genuinely thought would compost, and that is tea bags and coffee bags. I'm still pulling these out of my veggie patch 3 years later.
And this really looks completely intact.
That one really does. Now tea bags, on the other hand, are much more fine. So these are what I'm raking out of my veggie patch at the moment, which is an accumulation of tea bags, and I suspect that the change in putting plastic fibres through a tea bag has only happened maybe in the last 5 or 10 years or so, because I've been gardening for a long time and I don't remember this being a problem. but it certainly is now. So this is accumulating in my garden.
But there's more to know about that, and that is that as you make your cup of tea with one of these plastic fibre tea bags, nanoparticles of plastic go into your tea. So you're poisoning yourself at all ends,
that's
straight
my
into your mouth
understanding.
and into the soil.
And putting hot water on plastics also allows the toxins to come out into your tea. This is the innards of a paper coffee cup. So this, our paper coffee cups are not all paper, of course, otherwise they just turn
leak,
into mush,
really.
and they'd certainly leak. So this is what's left after you compost the paper away from a paper
That's
coffee
amazing.
cup.
Thanks for showing us that.
No
The thing that's
problem.
worth mentioning is that scientists have recently discovered that these plastics, when they break down into ever smaller particles, or actually they break up into ever smaller particles, is that once they reach the stage of being nanoparticles, they're absorbed into plant tissue. So if this rubbish from the compost, this plastic contamination from the compost is going into where we're growing food, it goes into the very tissue of the plant. So we're eating it in a complete cycle. So all the more reason to try and eliminate plastic from every day, really.
Absolutely, yeah. If we can avoid it at source, then we won't have it in our compost, and we won't have it in our natural environment, and we won't have it in our bodies.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks so much. I'm here with Andrew Raitt from the University of Western Australia. Andrew, can you tell me a little bit about the work you do?
Well, mainly urban soils, and a lot of that involves contamination of different types.
We're really concerned about plastic contamination of soils and how that contamination flows through from households, from our ordinary everyday use. And I wonder if you could just explain a little bit about your findings.
Well, we've sampled in some quite interesting places. We sample in nature reserves and public open space, and we find a lot of microplastics just in the surface of the soil in those environments. And look, my feeling is that because we're finding mostly fibres, it's coming off our clothes, right? So we're all wearing this nice, warm, synthetic, fleecy stuff, but it sheds, and it ends up all over the place. It can move so far, so quickly, just with the wind and
Because it's
with
so
water.
light.
It's
That's the
very,
thing.
very light.
Yeah.
Just it floats on water. It moves with the wind. And,
Yeah.
certainly, we know that microplastics can interact with plants. We know that they can also interact with some of the little critters that we find in soils, the springtails and
Or the
arthropods.
calembula.
Yeah, calembula and
Yeah.
mites and things. The other thing that we do know about microplastics is that they can attach quite strongly to some quite toxic things, so pesticides and metals and other pollutants like that. And that makes potentially their availability to organisms change a bit. And again, that's something we really need to know more about. Whatever we do as people is going to add plastics to the environment with our usual lifestyle, right? The clothes that most of us wear, the bags that we carry things in, the plastic utensils that we use, they're all shedding bits and pieces of stuff that's going into the environment. And what we think is that a lot of that will end up in the soil. It will probably then be carried by the rain. It will go down drains and go into stormwater drains and ultimately into our river systems and into oceans.
Out to the ocean.
So the starting place, really, we need to think about what's happening on land.
Well, look, I brought along part of my washing machine for you to have a look
Right.
at.
Yeah.
And at the bottom of it is a little bag that catches the fibres. Now, these little bags, it's been shown, are manifestly inadequate for catching all the fibres that are
Sure.
that get circulated by the
the
water.
mesh
So
is
that's
too large, really.
Yeah, and plus it flows over the top.
But this would be typical of the stuff that we're actually finding in
Yeah.
soils, and so nature reserves, parks, everywhere, home gardens, we find this sort of thing, and we actually find it in some cases not just in the surface soil but deeper as well. It's there in many cases all through the soil profile, and we find it in the drains as well, and we can match that quite well with land use. So
Yep.
the more people are living or conducting particular activities on a piece of land, so industry, there's more microplastics. Residential, a little bit less, and we've sampled in farmland. We can't detect microplastics above a blank a control sample.
We're inadvertently messing up the environment with even just with the water that washes out of our washing machines.
We are, and look, in other parts of the world they're not so lucky because in a lot of cases they're applying sewage sludges and things, biosolids, to soils which contain the stuff that comes out of your washing machine
That's
by
right.
and large, and they're full of microplastics. microplastics.
Yeah.
So agricultural land in many countries is
Yeah.
quite contaminated with plastics already.
And there's no
Yeah.
going back from that. You can't exactly strain the microplastics out of
No,
the soil, can
no,
you?
because they're similar size to some of the very finest soil particles.
Yeah, yeah. So what we have to do is stop it at source. It's that simple. Like to find ways not to use plastic, really.
That's the only way.
I'm here with Rebecca Prince-Roos, who's the founder of Plastic Free July and Plastic Free Foundation. And we're going to talk a little bit about what happens when you transition from using single-use plastics. Where do you go from there? What are your thoughts, Rebecca?
Well, my first thought, it was way harder than I thought, because you suddenly realise that plastic is just everywhere. But for me, it was really starting with changing habits, remembering my reusable shopping bags and my water bottles. And it isn't always easy, but I think it's really important to try, and we can't always do everything, but I think we can all do something. So we can all make small daily steps in our own lives to start to be part of the solution to what we all know now is a really growing problem in our environment. So whilst it's fantastic there is so much awareness now about the problem of single-use plastics and ending up in our environment, what we really don't want to see happening is that we just replace single-use plastics with other single-use material types. You know, we need to be using the resources of our earth wisely, and we don't really want to be using any materials that we just use for a few minutes and then throw away, because we now understand the long-lasting implications that these man-made materials have when they end up in our environment.
Yeah.
The important thing, and the most important thing we can do, is just focus on reducing and reusing, and not just treating the Earth's resources like something we can just use once and throw it away. This throwaway society is
the
a
problem.
very new, and it's a very new concept, really. And we've got to learn to do things differently,
Yep.
which is actually learning to go back to how we used to do things.
what our grandmothers did.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's really only 2 generations since we've come to this tremendous churn of physical possessions. Yeah.
It's great, and like you said, you know, that it's the simple ideas that are important, and they're the ideas that we used to have, and the great skills that we used to have, that I think that we're starting to relearn.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thanks a lot.
And so here we are, back in the studio. We've spoken to lots of different people who've given different points of view about how it is that plastic impacts on the health of our soils. We know that soil is a dynamic, complex living system, every bit as vibrant as a rainforest or a temperate reef, or any other system that makes up our biosphere. In only 50 years of using plastic, we're filling these systems with discarded plastic waste that continues to break into ever smaller fragments over time. We, and all living things, rely on our natural systems for our survival, so it's greatly in our interests to take care of them. As Will said earlier, we just step on this every single day. He's right. We never think about what's happening under our feet in the soil. Whole communities of animal, fungi and bacteria are helping to cycle the nutrients to make our soils more vibrant and fertile. Plants need this to grow, and plastic will inhibit this process. It's possible to eliminate single-use plastics from our lives. It takes some effort, but it can be done, and on the journey one learns how to live more creatively and more wholesomely. I invite you to join the Plastic Free July community of people all over the world who are taking steps to eliminate single-use plastic from their lives. It's a fun thing to do. Go to plasticfreejuly.org to find lots of fantastic ideas and start on your journey to creating the world we want to make, not the one we'll wind up with if we don't do anything.